Hello, Joel Tadman here, and as you can see I'm on the range at West Hill Golf Club because I've been hitting the new Srixon Z585 and Z785 irons. Now these replaced the 65 series, which did have a 965 in there as well, which was muscleback, but there's not a muscleback this time around. We've just got two models, and Srixon say this is more of an evolution product, so minor changes Srixon have implemented in these irons compared to the previous generation. But before we go on to that, I want to know what you think about Srixon. Are they a brand that for you perhaps goes slightly under the radar when you're choosing to buy new clubs? Is it a brand you're considering? We'd love to know what you think, so hit the pause button, write a comment in the video, let us know what you think about the brand Srixon. For me, the previous generation of irons were really impressive, and Srixon say these perform slightly better than those through some minor changes. On the 5 series we've got a speed channel here behind the face, which is going to allow the face to flex a little bit more to give you more ball speed compared to the previous generation. On the 7 series we've got a little bit more meat here behind the face, so that means the iron should feel a little bit softer and also give you a little bit more precision, a little bit more workability there as well. But really, in terms of looks, the 7 series does look very similar compared to the previous generation. On both of these irons we've got updated Tour VT soles, so what Srixon have done is actually increased the bounce on this sole. You can see, actually looking at compared to the previous generation, which I've tested them against, the V angle there on the sole is slightly more pronounced with these new irons, and Srixon say that should make them a little bit more forgiving through the turf. Like I mentioned, I've been having a really good hit with both of these irons today on the range, and also went to Foresight Sports HQ in Guildford to hit them on the GC Quad launch monitor indoors using premium golf balls. So I hit the new ones up against the old ones as well, so I've got 4 lots of data to share with you. The first thing to talk about is the looks. Like I mentioned, they really haven't changed that much. There's perhaps a little bit more going on this new 5 series, a few more graphics there on the back, but the 7 series really hasn't changed all that much. Between the two, the Z585 does look slightly larger than the 785, but they are, I would still say, more designed for the good player, the competent ball striker. You know, they're still better player irons. Just that 5 series does inspire a little bit more confidence down by the ball with that wider sole, slightly thicker top line, and a little bit more offset compared to the Z785. One thing I did notice with both of these irons is that they both have an extra groove on the face. As soon as I put it down behind the ball indoors, I noticed that they were spaced closer together, so who knows, you might get a little bit more control and consistency from the rough. It's not something I've tested today, but that's just something you might experience compared to the previous generation. The 7 iron lofts are the same as the previous generation, so with the 585 it's 31 degrees and it's 32 degrees on the Z785. I tested them both in the standard Nippon NS Pro Modus 3 shaft, Tour 120 in stiff in both of those. So without further ado, let's have a look at the numbers we've got from the launch monitor to look at the performance. Right, so I've got the iPad with all the data from my testing session this morning at Foresight using the GC Quad. One thing I would say first of all is that I didn't actually delete any shots with my testing. Well, apart from one shot, you'll notice shot number 12 a bit later in the video that I did delete because it was a little bit of a shank. But apart from that, I kept all my shots in, hit 5 shots with each, just to give you a better representation of the performance that you get off centre as well as centred hits. So starting with the 7 series, as you can see, I tested it up against the Z785, and you'll see that actually the performance was very similar. Actually got the same amount of ball speed, slightly higher launch, slightly lower spin, and the same amount of carry on a very similar ball flight. So as I kind of expected, with the design looking very similar from all different angles really, wasn't expecting massive differences in performance from generation to generation there, and you can see didn't really get it. But the only thing I would say is that you'll notice the distance on those 5 shots were very consistent when you consider looking at the club data. I didn't exactly pepper the exact centre of the face. You know, there was some slightly in the heel, slightly in the toe on that 785 range. So to get such consistent distances compared to the previous generation, which went from 160 to 168, whereas the new Z785 went from 163 to 166. So yes, I probably struck them a little bit better, but the distances were much more consistent, and that is ultimately what people are looking for from their irons, especially really good players. Moving on to the Z585 up against the Z585. Bit more of a difference in performance here from generation to generation. You'll see the ball speed did jump up by 2 miles an hour. Launch was slightly lower. The spin was also slightly lower, as was the ball flight, but more importantly, I did get 3 more yards of carry distance compared to the 565, and also you could argue the distances were marginally more consistent as well. You can see on the 565 I got a shot of 164 going up to 172, whereas the Z585 goes from 168 to 173, so consistently longer distances compared to the previous generation. And obviously you would expect this club to go further than the Z785 because the loft is 1 degree stronger and it's a little bit of a larger club head, so a little bit more forgiving. So that's the data kind of backing up what I expected to get from these irons. More distance from the Z585, more consistent distances from the Z785. Just want to talk you through some other observations with these new Srixon irons. They're both forward, so they both feel pretty soft, but I would say that the Z785 does feel marginally softer, kind of more of a thud to it, a bit more of a muted sound. And does have a narrower sole, so it does have a slightly different sensation through the turf. The 785 kind of cuts through the turf a little bit quicker, whereas the 5 Series kind of glides through the turf, if that makes sense. Didn't really notice from generation to generation the impact of that slightly more pronounced leading edge there. The V shape is slightly more pronounced, but didn't really notice much in terms of the turf interaction. But you would argue that that's going to give you a little bit more forgiveness, certainly, and stop, especially the 7 Series, maybe digging. If you do catch the ball slightly heavy, you might get a little bit more margin for error there with this new sole design. Testing here on the range and looking at the ball flight, it's actually pretty similar between these two 7 irons, because although the 5 Series is slightly stronger lofted, the construction is slightly different. There's a wider sole there, it's a little bit larger. It does actually get the ball up in the air a little bit easier. In fact, the launch angle and ball flight between these two 7 irons is actually very similar, and that's why I think there's a lot of scope here to mix and match these two models within a set of Z785 irons. So you could comfortably go for the 5 Series in your long irons and then move to the 7 Series in the mid or the short irons, and I think you would get a nice balance there of distance, consistency and feel, but then just a little bit more forgiveness on those long iron shots where you need it with a little bit more precision, as we've proved with the launch monitor data that you get with the 7 Series in the short irons on those scoring shots. Both of them are forgiving. The 5 Series is obviously more forgiving. The 7 Series is a little bit more penal on those off-centre hits. I think in terms of who should be playing these irons, I do still think it should be relatively competent ball strikers. But there is a degree of help on offer, especially in the 5 Series, to make your miss hits a little bit better if you're perhaps maybe a high single figure, low teen player. This iron could well be the club for you if you like a soft feeling, compact looking iron that's perhaps going to give you a little bit more forgiveness with good distance as well. So all in all, some very impressive performance, and maybe this review has put Srixon on your radar as a brand you're now going to be thinking about. Should you be looking to upgrade your irons if you're a relatively good player? These should certainly be ones to try in 2018. They come in at a pretty reasonable price. I think it's £799 for a 6-piece set, so certainly some good value here considering how nice they look and how nice they play as well. It's a nice all-round package from both of these irons. The 5 Series will be slightly more appealing to a wider audience, but the 7 Series for me is the one I would go for. I love the kind of clean lines. It's a very compact looking iron, quite forgiving through the turf with that nice, more pronounced VT sole on there and some very, very soft feeling shots indeed. So hope you enjoyed that review. Make sure you click the like button if you haven't already. Love to hear from you. What do you think about these new Srixon Z85 range of irons? Are you going to be giving them a try? We'd love to hear from you. But for now, from a sunny West Hill, it's goodbye.